The city of Vastcrath loomed overhead like the skeleton of some prehistoric beast, its towers jutting into the murky twilight. Magic saturated every stone, every breath of air, so thick that Elliot could taste it, metallic on his tongue as he worked. His fingers, calloused and stained with alchemical burns, traced the edge of a copper disc, while his other hand carefully measured 3 drops of quicksilver into its center.
"That'll be 8 skints,"
Elliot said to the merchant's wife waiting before his rickety stall.
"Less than what you pay at the artificer's quarter."
The woman, plump, human, and desperate, clutched the amulet to her chest.
"And will it ward off the winter cough? My youngest has weak lungs, and the healers at the Spiritborn College won't see humans till spring."
Elliot nodded, his face carefully blank. He'd learned that compassion cost extra in exile.
"A transmutation binds silver to copper with your child's breath pattern. It won't cure, but it'll ease."
She left 8 copper coins and a grateful nod. Elliot swept them into his sleeve without counting. Pride was another luxury he'd surrendered after the accident. As twilight deepened into true dark, he felt the familiar tightness in his chest. The price of unsanctioned alchemy. The curse the guild had placed on him when they'd thrown him out was elegant in its cruelty. Practice the art that defined him, and suffer for it. Every transmutation without their blessing was a small death. Poetic, they'd called it when they sentenced him.
32 today,
he muttered to himself, counting the transmutations he'd performed.
Not bad for a dead man.
He packed his meager tools and prepared to move on. 3 days in one place was risky. The guild's eyes were everywhere. But as he turned to leave, a small glass vial landed at his feet with a clink. Elliot snatched it up, reflex, not greed, and found himself staring at a liquid so perfectly transparent it seemed to bend light around it. The courier was already gone, melted into the crowd. Attached to the vial was a tiny scroll bearing the High Guild of Arcana seal, a stylized eye encircled by 12 interlocking hands. Elliot felt his pulse quicken. He knew he should throw it away, smash it, run. But curiosity, the same that had led to his brother's death, won out. He broke the seal. Elliot Varen, the guild extends an invitation to redeem yourself. The Chalice of Myrrh awaits retrieval from the Everbone Vault. Success will bring full pardon and restoration of rank. Failure is expected. Your humanity makes you uniquely disposable for this task. The bearer of this vial will find you again at midnight. Drink to accept. The glyphs shimmered with verity marks. This was no forgery. Elliot laughed, a sharp, bitter sound.
Restoration and pardon.
He rolled the vial between his fingers, watching the liquid catch what little light remained in the square.
All I need to do is die trying.
Yet something in him stirred. Not hope. He'd cauterized that particular weakness 3 years ago, when he'd carried his brother's body from the wreckage of their laboratory. But something equally dangerous. Purpose. The Chalice of Myrrh. Even in his disgrace, he recognized the name from ancient texts, an artifact said to distill the very essence of the soul.
Well, Tanner,
he whispered to the ghost of his brother,
they've finally found a use for me.
At midnight, Elliot drained the vial in one swift motion. It tasted of nothing, which was somehow worse than any bitterness. They couldn't even give him the dignity of suffering for his choice. The Everbone Vault rose from the mists of the northern waste like a tumor erupting from diseased flesh. Its architecture defied reason, part cathedral, part abattoir. Its walls formed what appeared to be fused ivory and blackened sinew.
Charming,
Elliot muttered, his voice nearly lost in the howling wind.
The interior decorator, charged by the nightmare?
His guild escort, a thin, long-limbed man with hoarfrost blue eyes that marked him as divine-blooded, did not smile. The vault predates civilization. It is alive, conscious. Only those it deems worthy may enter and exit. Over centuries, 17 retrieval parties have entered. None have returned.
And yet you brought me all this way. I'm touched by your confidence.
We brought you because you're already dead, alchemist. The escort gestured toward the entrance, a puckered orifice in the wall that pulsed with sickly light. Humans. So fragile, so short-lived, but occasionally useful.
Like sending a canary into a mine,
Elliot said. The escort's eyebrows rose. A what?
Before your kind decided mining was beneath you, humans used to bring small birds into tunnels. The air turned poisonous, the bird would die first.
Elliot smiled thinly.
I'm your canary.
More articulate than most birds, but the principle stands. The escort held out a crystalline orb. This will record what you see. If you die spectacularly enough, perhaps we'll learn something useful for the next attempt. Elliot took the orb, weighing it in his palm.
If I refuse?
The guild knows about the little girl with the amulet. Cynthia, isn't it? Winter cough is so often fatal in children. The divine blood's eyes gleamed. One word, and the transmutation you placed on that amulet inverts. Quicksilver does fascinating things to small lungs. Elliot's hand tightened around the orb until he feared it might shatter. The curse in his chest flared in response to his anger, sending black spots dancing across his vision. There's the human volatility we expected. The escort's voice was clinical, detached. It's why your kind makes such poor mages. No control. All passion and impulse. Elliot forced his breathing to steady.
Is there anything I should know before I enter this death trap? Or is the fun just watching me fumble?
The vault responds to emotion. Fear, rage, grief. Control them and you might survive the first chamber. The escort stepped back. Master them, and you might reach the second.
And the chalice? What does it look like?
Black. Roughly the size of a human skull, contained within a pulsing stone heart. The divine blood's lips curved in what might have been a smile. You'll recognize it by the fact that everything else in the vault will try to kill you. The chalice will simply wait to be claimed. Elliot nodded once, then turned toward the entrance. The pulsing orifice widened as he approached, as if the vault itself were inhaling. Varin, the escort's voice halted him. The guild has a wager on how far you'll get. I've put quite a sum on immediate failure. Don't disappoint me. Elliot glanced back, a crooked smile forming.
Careful with that wager. Human volatility can be unpredictable.
Then he stepped into the dark, the wells of the vault closing around him like jaws. The first chamber stretched impossibly vast, its ceiling lost in shadow, its floor a mosaic of iridescent tiles that shifted subtly underfoot. The air smelled of ozone and rot. Elliot placed the recording orb in his pocket and assessed his senses as only an alchemist could, breaking down perception into its constituent parts, separating illusion from substance. The room wasn't empty. It teemed with half-formed shapes that shimmered just beyond full materialization.
Impressive,
he said out loud, his voice echoing.
A fear manifestation chamber. Very original.
The shadows quivered in response, coalescing into more substantial forms. Figures began to emerge, familiar faces from Elliot's past, failed apprentices, colleagues who'd shunned him after the accident, his parents, their expressions frozen in disappointment, and finally, unsurprisingly, Tanner, his youngest brother, looking just as he had that final day, his smile bright and trusting before the explosion.
Tanner.
The name escaped before Elliot could stop it. The apparition stepped forward, its form more solid than the others.
Brother,
it said in Tanner's voice, achingly familiar.
Why did you let me die?
Elliot closed his eyes. Control. Master emotion.
You're not him.
I trusted you. The voice circled him, intimate as a whisper. We were going to change the world. Instead, you changed me to ash.
Stop!
Do you remember what it felt like? My hand in yours and then nothing. Bone. And air. Elliot's control slipped. His eyes snapped open, rage surging through him.
I said stop!
The apparition smiled, and in that smile was nothing of Tanner, only malice and hunger. It lunged, fingers elongating into bone-white talons. Elliot moved on instinct. His hand plunged into his satchel, fingers closing around a vial of powdered cinnabar. He hurled it at the apparition's face, simultaneously striking a spark with his flint ring. The powder ignited in a flash of crimson, so bright it turned the Shadow Tanner translucent. Elliot followed with the alchemical counter-gesture he'd developed years ago for dispersing harmful ethers, a complex sequence of signs that manipulated the energy in the chamber.
Not real!
He ground out between clenched teeth as pain blossomed in his chest. Each sign he traced intensified the guild's curse, but he pushed through.
You are substance without essence!
The final words activated the transmutation. The crimson light shattered, piercing through every shadow in the chamber. The apparition screamed, Tanner's voice rising highest among them, and dissipated like smoke. Elliot collapsed to his knees, chest heaving. Blood leaked from his nose, his ears, the corners of his eyes. The price of working serious alchemy under the curse. He spat a mouthful of copper-tasting saliva onto the iridescent floor.
Is that all?
He croaked, glaring up at the shadows.
You think my guilt is news to me? I made it my fucking bedmate for 3 years.
The chamber trembled. The floor tiles began to shift, rearranging themselves into a spiraling path that led to a previously invisible doorway. Elliot dragged himself upright, wiping blood from his face with his sleeve.
Thought so.
He took a deep breath, steeling himself. The curse's pain would fade to a dull ache, as it always did. He'd survived worse. He would survive this. The recording orb glowed briefly in his pocket. Elliot pulled it out and spoke directly to it.
Tell your divine-blooded friend he's lost his wager. Human volatility just cleared the first chamber.
He tucked the orb away and followed the spiral path forward. As he delved deeper into the vault, the challenges grew more insidious. A labyrinth that reconfigured itself based on his fears. Mechanical guardians powered by the essence of previous failed seekers. A room filled with perfect, still reflections of himself at every age, including futures he would never live to see. Through each trial, Elliot relied not on brute force, but on the thing that had made him a prodigy before his fall. His understanding of the fundamental principle that all alchemists eventually learn or die never knowing. That the universe is constantly seeking balance. Every transmutation requires exchange. You cannot gain without losing something of equal value. And as he progressed, he began to understand the vault's true purpose. It wasn't designed to keep people out. It was designed to ensure that only the right person could reach the center. Someone who understood sacrifice. Someone who had already lost everything, but kept going anyway. In the 7th chamber, he encountered a golem fashioned from the consolidated guilt of 1,000 regrets. It stood 3 times his height, its body formed of a metallic substance that absorbed light rather than reflected it.
I know you,
Elliot said, oddly calm despite the blood now crusted around his fingernails from his last alchemical working.
You're what happens when someone tries to transmutate away their pain instead of through it.
The golem's featureless head tilted, as if curious.
My brother died because I was impatient,
Elliot continued.
I tried to bypass the law of equivalent exchange. I thought I was brilliant enough to cheat the universe.
He laughed softly.
As if I were the first arrogant bastard to try.
He stepped closer to the looming figure.
I don't want to be free of my guilt. It's all I have left of him.
The golem's surface rippled like disturbed water. It raised one massive hand, not to strike, but to point toward a doorway that had appeared in the far wall. Elliot nodded in understanding.
Thank you.
As he passed the golem, he felt a strange lightness, not the absence of his guilt, but its transformation into something he could carry more easily. The curse in his chest seemed to loosen its grip, just slightly. The final chamber was small and perfectly circular, its walls pulsing with a dull red light that mimicked a heartbeat. In the center, suspended in midair, was exactly what the divine blood had described, a stone heart the size of a melon, veins of black crystal threading through its surface, beating in time with the chamber's pulse. And within it, visible through a transparent section of the stone, was the chalice, obsidian black, simple in design, radiating a power that made the air around it waver.
Hello, beautiful,
Elliot whispered, approaching slowly.
You've caused quite a stir.
He circled the floating heart, studying it from all angles. There were no obvious mechanisms, no locks or seals, just smooth stone, warm to the touch when he cautiously reached out. Then he noticed the inscription encircling the transparent window, etched in a script so ancient he could barely decipher it. He traced the symbols with his finger, translating aloud.
What is freely given cannot be taken. What is taken cannot be kept. The chalice accepts only that which is offered with full knowledge of its price.
Elliot frowned.
Cryptic. Helpful.
He considered his options. He could attempt to alchemically extract the chalice, but that would likely trigger whatever defenses remained. He could try to break the stone heart, but that might damage the chalice itself. Or he could follow the inscription's hint.
All right,
he said, addressing the heart directly.
I freely give you my attempt. I offer myself with full knowledge that this might kill me. Is that enough?
The heart's pulse quickened momentarily, then settled back into its rhythm. Nothing else changed. Elliot sighed.
Of course not. That would have been too easy.
He sat cross-legged before the heart and closed his eyes, thinking. The vault had tested his fear, his guilt, his understanding of sacrifice. What remained? Intention.
I don't want the chalice for myself,
he said.
I don't want the guild to have it either. I don't know what it does, but I know power like this shouldn't be hoarded by those who already rule.
He opened his eyes, meeting his distorted reflection in the stone's surface.
I want to understand its purpose. That's all I'm offering. My understanding.
The stone heart trembled. A hairline crack appeared in its surface, spreading slowly like ice breaking in spring.
That's it, isn't it?
Elliot stood, excitement overriding caution.
You want someone who seeks knowledge, not power.
The crack widened. The heart split open with a sound like distant thunder, and the chalice tumbled into Elliot's waiting hands. It was surprisingly light, cool against his skin despite the chamber's warmth. Inside of the cup was filled with a liquid so dark it seemed to absorb the light around it.
Now what?
Elliot murmured, turning the chalice carefully. A voice answered, not from the air, but directly in his mind, as if his own thoughts had acquired a different timbre. To claim the chalice is to consume what it holds. To consume what it holds is to be consumed in turn. Elliot stared at the dark liquid.
You want me to drink this?
The chalice has waited for one who understands the alchemist's truth. Transformation requires sacrifice, consumption and dissolution, breaking before remaking.
And if I refuse?
Then place the chalice back in its heart and leave with your life, but without your prize. Elliot laughed. the sound echoing strangely in the chamber.
The guild'll kill me if I return empty-handed. Or worse, they'll use me to hurt others.
He swirled his hand in the cup.
What will this do to me?
Everything. Nothing. The outcome depends on the vessel.
Helpful,
Elliot muttered. He pulled out the recording orb, which had been silent throughout his journey. He raised the chalice in a mock toast.
Are you watching, Guild? Your canary is about to do something particularly stupid.
Then, he drank. The liquid burned like acid, then like ice, then like nothing he'd ever felt before. It coursed through him, a river of midnight breaking against every shore of his being. Elliot fell to his knees, the empty chalice clattering to the floor beside him. Visions assaulted him, lives not his own stretching back centuries. A weeping priestess drinking from the chalice before walking into fire. A warrior king consuming its contents before a battle he knew he couldn't win. A child dying of plague, the chalice at her lips as her mother wailed. Each memory carried its own distinctive pain, its own regret, its own moment of terrible clarity. Beneath them all ran a constant thread, the understanding that some burdens must be borne by the mortal, the finite, the breakable. Some tasks cannot be entrusted to those who have forever to live, whose immortality renders consequence theoretical rather than immediate. As the visions faded, Elliot found himself curled on the floor, throat raw from screaming. The chalice lay beside him, now filled again with the same dark liquid.
How? Oh,
he croaked, reaching for it with a trembling hand. The chalice is never empty for long. Its nature is to fill with what must be carried. Elliot struggled to his feet, clutching the chalice. His body felt simultaneously leaden and ethereal, as if he might either crash through the floor or float away. The curse in his chest had changed. It was still there, but transmuted into something else, something that hummed rather than ached.
What happens now?
He asked. You leave. You are the chalice's bearer now. What you do with that burden is your choice. The chamber shuddered. The walls parted, revealing a direct path out of the vault. Not the way he had come, but a new route that seemed to bypass all previous chambers. Elliot tucked the chalice into his satchel and followed the path, his steps unsteady, but determined. The divine blood's face, when Elliot emerged from the vault, was almost worth the ordeal. Shock flashed across his perfect features before he mastered it, replacing it with cool assessment. You survived, he said, voice flat with displeasure.
Don't sound so disappointed.
Elliot's voice was ragged, barely recognizable.
I'd hate to think you weren't happy to see me.
The chalice. Elliot reached into his satchel and produced it. The black cup gleamed in the pale sunlight, its contents rippling slightly despite his steady hand. The divine blood's eyes widened. You've done it. The guild will be pleased.
Will they?
Elliot smiled, and something in his expression made the escort take a step back.
I'm not sure they will.
Give it to me. The divine blood held out his hand, imperious even in his unease.
I don't think so.
Elliot raised the chalice.
The inscription says it accepts only what is freely given. I'm not giving it to you.
You misunderstand, human. You were sent to retrieve it for the guild. Your task is complete. Now hand it over before I...
For you what?
Elliot interrupted, his voice suddenly stronger.
Before you threaten more children? Before you remind me of my place?
He laughed, and the sound carried an edge that hadn't been there before.
I know my place now. It's between your kind and this cup.
The divine blood's hand dropped to the ornate dagger at his belt. The guild warned me you might become difficult. The artifact often affects mortal minds. Hand it over, and we'll help you recover.
You still don't understand.
Elliot held the chalice higher.
I drank from it.
Horror bloomed across the escort's face.
You...
What?
It told me to. So I did.
Impossible. The elixir is poison to all but the divine. You should be dead.
Perhaps humanity has virtues you've overlooked.
Elliot took a step forward toward the divine blood, who retreated in matching measure.
Now, we're going back to the guild. I have questions for them.
The guild will study you like a specimen, the divine blood hissed, drawing his dagger. The blade shimmered with enchantment. They will cut you open to see what miracle kept you alive.
They can try.
The escort lunged, dagger arcing toward Elliot's throat. Time seemed to slow. Elliot didn't dodge. He couldn't have. His body was still too heavy. But something else happened instead. The curse in his chest pulsed, and with it came awareness of the escort's physical composition, as clear as if he were seeing the divine blood's elemental makeup laid bare. Without conscious thought, Elliot made a simple gesture. The escort froze mid-lunge, eyes widening in shock as his own dagger turned to sand in his grip.
What?
The divine blood gasped. Elliot stared at his hand in wonder.
I need components. No preparation, no blood price.
He looked up at the escort.
The curse is still there, but it's changed.
What have you done?
I think,
Elliot said slowly,
I've become the component.
The guild's grand hall stretched beneath vaulted ceilings, painted with scenes of divine triumph. Massive chandeliers of crystal and bone cast cold light over the assembled mages and sorcerers. The elite of Vaskrath gathered to witness the return of the Chalice of Myrrh. Elliot stood before the High Council, 13 figures seated on elevated thrones, their faces obscured by ornate masks representing the primal forces. At their center sat the Archmagus, her mask a swirl of silver depicting a stylized maelstrom. Elliot Varin, she intoned, her voice amplified by the hall's acoustics. You have succeeded where all others have failed. The guild acknowledges your service. Elliot said nothing. Beside him, the divine blood escort stood unnaturally still, fear evident in the rigid set of his shoulders. The chalice, the Archmagus continued, extending a gloved hand. Present it. Elliot withdrew the chalice from his satchel. The assembled crowd murmured as they caught sight of the black cup and its mysterious contents.
I have questions first,
Elliot said, his voice carrying in the sudden silence.
You are not here to ask questions,
one of the other council members snapped, a corpulent man wearing a mask of molten gold.
You are here to deliver what you were sent to retrieve. Why'd you send me? The truth.
The Archmagus tilted her head. Because you were expendable. Because you were once promising. Because the vault has never permitted entry to the divine or the spirit-born. Only humans have ever passed its threshold, and only to die within. You were a calculated risk.
And the chalice? What do you want with it?
That is guild business. Elliot lifted the cup slightly.
I drank from it.
The hall erupted in gasps and exclamations. The council members leaned forward in their thrones, masks failing to hide their shock. Impossible, the Archmagus breathed. The elixir is...
Death to mortals, yes, I heard.
Elliot smiled thinly.
Yet, here I stand. A trick,
the gold masked counselor spat.
The human is lying. Test me then, Elliot challenged. Ask me what I saw in the visions. Ask me what the chalice told me about its purpose.
The Archmagus raised a hand, silencing the growing commotion. What did you see, human?
I saw why you want it. I saw what you believe it can do.
Elliot stepped forward, chalice held before him.
You think it contains divine essence. That Drinking it will elevate you further above humanity. That it'll make you gods in truth, not just in longevity and power.
And does it not? The Archmagus asked, leaning forward.
No. It contains what mortality knows and divinity has forgotten. That pain is the price of meaning. That sacrifice is the source of true power.
Elliot's voice hardened.
The chalice doesn't elevate the divine. It was created to give humans the strength to bear what must be borne.
A charming interpretation. The Archmagus gestured, and guards moved to flank Elliot. But we will determine the chalice's true purpose ourselves. Seize him. Take the artifact. The guards advanced, but Elliot was ready. He raised his free hand, focusing on the curse-turned catalyst in his chest. With a thought, he transmuted the air around him, not into a shield or a weapon, but into a truth that all could see. The visions the chalice had shown him, projected into the hall like living murals. The priestess walking into fire, the warrior king facing impossible odds, the dying child and her grieving mother. All of them human, all of them choosing their pain.
A chalice was never meant for you,
Elliot said as the images swirled around the hall.
It was meant for us, the fragile ones, the short-lived ones, the ones who feel everything so deeply because we have so little time.
The guards hesitated, transfixed by the visions. The council members shifted uneasily on their thrones.
Enough,
the Archmagus commanded, rising. This changes nothing. The chalice belongs to the guild now, and you, Elliot Varin, will remain under our supervision. Your unexpected survival presents interesting research opportunities. Elliot let the visions fade.
I'm not staying. Neither is the chalice.
You have nowhere to run, no allies, no resources. The curse we placed on you will kill you the moment you leave our presence. The Archmagus's voice softened, became almost maternal. But cooperate, and we can ease your suffering. You've proven your worth. The guild rewards loyalty. For a moment, Elliot wavered. The promise of belonging again, of validation, tugged at him with surprising strength. He'd been alone so long, and the Archmagus was right. Where could he go? What could he do against the combined might of the guild? Then he felt the weight of the chalice in his hand, heard the whisper of all the lives it had touched. He remembered Tanner's face, not the shadow the vault had conjured, but his brother as he truly was. Brilliant, kind, excited about the future they would build together.
I know what the curse does now,
Elliot said quietly.
It doesn't kill me for using alchemy. It uses me to power the alchemy. I'm the component that's consumed. The equation balances, but at my expense.
He looked directly at the Archmagus.
But the chalice changed the equation. I'm still the component, but now I choose how I'm consumed.
Before anyone could react, Elliot drank from the chalice again. Not fully, just a sip. The liquid burned less this time, like a familiar fire that spread through his veins like liquid certainty. He set the chalice down on the marble floor and clapped his hands together once. The sound rang out like a bell. The grand hall's structure began to shift. Not violently, not destructively, but deliberately. Stone flowing like water, reshaping itself. The guards found themselves encased to the waist in suddenly fluid marble that hardened just as quickly. The council members' thrones sank into the floor, trapping them in place.
What is this?
The Archmagus demanded, struggling against her confinement.
Architectural alchemy,
Elliot replied, picking up the chalice again.
Transmitting structures without breaking them. Supposed to be impossible without years of preparation and a dozen masters working in concert.
He shrugged.
Turns out you just need the right catalyst. Release us immediately. I will. But first, you're going to tell me where you keep your records on the chalice. Where you learned of it. What you know of its history.
The Archmagus's mask slipped slightly. revealing a glimpse of ageless beauty and furious eyes. "You dare to demand—"
"I dare,"
Elliot cut her off.
"because I can. Because I'm done being your canary. Tell me, I'll transmute this entire hall into a very elaborate birdcage, and I'll leave you to contemplate the irony."
Days later, Elliot stood in the guild's restricted archives, surrounded by ancient texts and scrolls. Beside him, a young woman with pale green skin and silver hair helped sort through the materials. Lenari, a half-spirit apprentice who had sought him out after his confrontation with the council. "They're mobilizing against you," she said, her voice soft but urgent. "The Archmages has called in specialist hunter mages from the Eastern Territories. They'll be here within days." Elliot nodded absently, his attention fixed on a crumbling codex.
"Listen to this. A chalice was forged in the First Age, when the boundaries between mortal and divine were still being negotiated. It was filled with distilled essence of human struggle, not their weakness as the gods believed, but their greatest strength, the capacity to endure suffering with purpose."
"Why would the gods create such a thing?" Lenari asked, peering over his shoulder.
"They didn't."
Elliot turned the page, revealing an illustration of a human woman presenting the chalice to a being of light.
"We did, and we gave it to them as a gift, a reminder of what they'd lost in gaining immortality."
Lenari frowned. "I don't understand."
"The divine don't suffer as we do. They experience pain, loss, even grief, but without urgency, without the knowledge that their time is limited."
Elliot traced the illustration with his finger.
"This says the chalice was meant to help them remember what it meant to be mortal, to reconnect them with the world they governed, but no longer understood."
"But they rejected it," Lenari guessed.
"Some did. Others tried to use it to extend their own powers."
Elliot flipped to another page.
"Those who drank from it without understanding its purpose were driven mad. The divine mind cannot reconcile immortality with the weight of mortal perspective."
"So, they hid it away."
"They tried to destroy it. When that failed, they locked it in the vault and erased most records of its existence."
Elliot closed the codex carefully.
"But legends persisted. Every few centuries, someone rediscovers the story and seeks the chalice, always for the wrong reasons."
"And the guild? What do they want with it?" Elliot moved to another table where a more recent manuscript lay open.
"According to this, they believe it's a key to transcending their current limitations. Even the divine-blooded and spirit-born have boundaries. Elements they cannot control, magics they cannot master. They think the chalice will remove some of those barriers."
"Will it?"
"No, wasn't designed for that."
Elliot picked up the chalice from where it sat among the scrolls. In the archive's lamplight, it seemed to pulse with its own inner darkness.
"Was designed to remind the powerful that power isn't the point."
Lenari studied him, her silver eyes reflecting the lamp's flame. "What will you do with it?"
"I'm still figuring that out."
Elliot set the chalice down.
"But I know what I want to do. I won't let them have it. Not when they plan to use it to further entrench their control."
"They'll kill you for it."
"Probably."
Elliot smiled faintly.
"But I'm getting harder to kill by the day."
It was true. Since drinking from the chalice, the changes in him had accelerated. His alchemical abilities had expanded beyond anything he'd previously imagined possible. He could transmute with a thought, reshape matter with a gesture. The guild's curse remained, but transformed. Each working still cost him, but now he controlled how and when he paid that price. But there were other costs, ones he hadn't anticipated. Memory slipped away after each major transmutation. Small moments at first, then larger chunks of his past. His connection to his own history was fraying. After particularly powerful workings, he sometimes couldn't remember Tanner's face until he slept and dreamed. "I found something else," Lenari said, interrupting his thoughts. She held up a thin volume bound in what appeared to be human skin. It was hidden behind the other texts. I don't think they meant for anyone to find it. Elliot took it carefully.
What is it?
Records of the guild's founding. And this. She opened to a marked page, pointing to a detailed diagram. The source engine. Elliot's breath caught. The diagram showed an immense, complex mechanism built around a central chamber, filled with swirling shapes that could only be souls.
Is that what I think it is?
Lenari nodded grimly. The guild's power source. The real reason they can work greater magics than anyone else in Vaskrath. They're using captured souls to fuel their spells. Criminals, debtors, orphans. Anyone who won't be missed.
God,
Elliot whispered, horror and rage mingling in his voice.
How long has this been happening?
Centuries, according to these records. The engine is directly beneath us, at the heart of the guild complex. Elliot stared at the diagram, then at the chalice, understanding dawning.
This is it. This is what the chalice was meant for. Not to empower the divine, but to give a mortal the strength to challenge them when they've gone too far.
You can't be serious. Lenari grabbed his arm. The entire guild against one man? Even with the chalice, you can't win that fight.
I don't need to win.
Elliot closed the book. Decision made.
I just need to break the engine. Free those souls. Stop this abomination.
They'll destroy you.
Probably.
He met her gaze steadily.
But some prices are worth paying. That's what the chalice has been trying to tell me all along.
The day of reckoning came sooner than either of them had planned. Word reached them that the hunter mages had arrived early. 12 specialists trained specifically to contain and neutralize rogue talents. We need to leave, Lenari urged as they hurried through the guild's lower corridors. Now! While we still can!
You should go,
Elliot agreed.
There's a service tunnel that leads straight to the eastern quarter. Take these.
He pressed several pages of notes into her hands.
Everything I learned about the chalice, about what the guild has been doing. Find someone you trust outside the city. Make sure this knowledge survives.
I'm not leaving you to face them alone.
You have to.
Elliot's voice was gentle but firm.
Someone needs to remember why this happened. Someone needs to make sure they don't twist the story afterward.
Tears shimmered in Lenari's silver eyes. You're talking like you're already dead.
I'm talking like someone who knows the value of witness.
He squeezed her shoulders.
Go. Please.
After a moment's hesitation, she nodded. What will you do? Elliot glanced toward the depths of the guild complex, where the source engine hummed its obscene song.
What humans have always done when faced with impossible odds. Something spectacularly, gloriously stupid.
The source engine chamber was a vast cathedral of suffering. Hundreds of crystalline containers lined the walls, each holding a trapped soul, visible as swirling mists of color and consciousness, pressing against their prisons like desperate hands against glass. At the center stood a massive apparatus of silver and obsidian, channeling the soul's energy into the ley lines that powered the guild's magic. The sight stopped Elliot in his tracks. No diagram could have prepared him for the scale of the atrocity, for the silent screaming he could feel resonating in his bones. Beautiful, isn't it? Elliot whirled to find the archmagus standing at the chamber's entrance, her silver mask discarded to reveal a face of timeless perfection. Behind her stood the hunter mages, tall, identical figures in crimson robes, their eyes glowing with borrowed power.
You call this beautiful?
Elliot gestured at the soul containers.
This is monstrous.
This is necessity, the archmagus corrected, descending the steps toward him. This is the cost of civilization, of progress. These souls would have amounted to nothing in life. Petty criminals, debtors, the unwanted. In death they serve a greater purpose.
That wasn't your decision to make.
'Tis precisely my decision. She stopped a few paces away, studying him with clinical interest. Just as it is my decision, what happens to you now? The chalice, Elliot. Hand it over, and I may yet be merciful. Elliot withdrew the black cup from his satchel.
You know what this truly is now, don't you? You've had time to translate the older texts to verify what I told you.
A tool of remarkable power, designed for lesser beings to briefly touch divinity.
No.
Elliot shook his head.
A reminder that divinity without compassion is just tyranny with better clothes.
He raised the chalice.
You fear it because you know it can be used against you.
I fear nothing, least of all a human with delusions of significance. The archmages signaled, and the hunter mages spread out, encircling Elliot. Last chance. The chalice. Or we extract it from whatever remains of you after we're done. Elliot looked around at the trapped souls, at the engine that consumed them, at the hunter mages with their borrowed power. Then he smiled. A genuine smile, surprising even himself with its warmth.
You still don't understand what makes humans dangerous, do ya?
He said.
It's not our magic, or our intellect, or our ambition. It's simpler than that.
He raised the chalice to his lips.
We know we're gonna die anyway, so sometimes we choose how we burn.
He drank deeply, emptying the chalice in one long draught. The chamber erupted into chaos. The hunter mages lunged forward. The archmages screamed an incantation. Magic surged like a tsunami. Binding spells, nullification wards, death curses. All directed at Elliot. None of it mattered. The elixir hit his system like lightning striking dry tinder. Every cell in his body became a conduit for something ancient and inevitable. The guild's curse in his chest exploded outward. No longer a containment, but a connection, linking him directly to the source engine, to the trapped souls, to the very foundations of the guild itself. Elliot saw everything. The ley lines beneath the city, the magical infrastructure built over centuries, the bonds holding the souls captive. All of it suddenly transparent to him like a master alchemist viewing the elemental composition of the world. And all of it transmutable. Stop him! The archmages shrieked as the chamber began to tremble. Elliot closed his eyes. He could feel his memories dissolving. Not just trivial ones now, but core pieces of himself. His childhood, his apprenticeship, Tanner's face, his own name. Each transmutation consumed more of him, burned more away of what made him Elliot Varen. It didn't matter. He had enough left for what needed to be done. With the last of his conscious identity, he reached out, not physically, but alchemically, and changed the fundamental nature of the source engine, not destroying it, but transmuting it from a prison into a doorway, from a consumption mechanism into a release valve. The souls responded immediately. They surged from their containers, a torrent of light and consciousness, pouring into the engine and through it, not to be consumed, but to escape, to ascend, to finally be free. The archmages screamed as her connection to their power was severed. The hunter mages collapsed like puppets with cut strings. The guild complex above them began to crumble as the ley lines destabilized, centuries of magical architecture suddenly deprived of its foundation. And at the center of it all, Elliot Varen, or what remained of him, smiled as the final pieces of his identity burned away in the conflagration of his greatest work. His last memory to fade was not, as he'd expected, his brother's face. It was something simpler. The feeling of Tanner's hand in his when they were children, walking home at sunset, talking about all the wonders they would someday create together. Years later, in a vast craft transformed, A statue stood in what had once been the guild plaza. It depicted not a divine blood or a spirit-born hero, but a human man holding an empty chalice. The plaque bore no name, only a simple inscription. He drank the poison, so others might be free. Linari, now leader of the Circle of Alchemists, an organization dedicated to teaching alchemy as a tool for healing rather than power, often brought her students to this spot. They would sit in the shade of flowering trees that had somehow grown in the ruins overnight after the guild's fall, and she would tell them the story of the human alchemist who had changed everything.
Why did he drink it, knowing what it would cost?
A young student asked one spring afternoon, staring up at the statue's face, serene, despite the agony it must have witnessed. Linari touched the statue's base, where a small sprig of silver herb grew in a crack, the same herb that had appeared everywhere the free souls had passed during their ascension. Because pain was not his enemy, she said. It was his teacher, and in the end, it became his strength. The student frowned, not yet understanding.
But he lost everything.
No. Linari smiled, looking up at the statue's face. A face she had ensured the sculpture captured perfectly, despite having only her memories to work from. He chose everything. There's a difference. As they gathered their books to leave, a small boy lingered, studying the statue with unusual intensity.
What happens to people who drink from the chalice?
He asked, his eyes alight with curiosity. They change, Linari said. Not always in ways you can see, but always in ways that matter.
Did it hurt him?
Linari considered the question carefully. Yes, she said finally, but that wasn't the point.
Well, what's the point then?
That he chose the fire, she replied, resting her hand on the boy's shoulder. And in choosing it, he made it his own. The boy nodded, satisfied with an answer he wouldn't fully understand for many years. As they walked away, Linari glanced back at the statue, at the face she had known, the sacrifice she had witnessed, the change that had rippled outward from one human's impossible choice. In the late afternoon light, for just a moment, she could have sworn the statue's empty chalice gleamed with a darkness deep enough to hold stars.